Welcome to the 2020 New Testament Challenge. It's Monday, and today we're in Acts chapter 25. We're following Paul as he's going from one court to another. He's trying to defend himself. He's sharing his testimony. This is going from chapter 21 all the way to chapter 26. Here in chapter 25, Paul is before Governor Festus. Now, Governor Festus is a brand new governor. It was Governor Felix, his term ended, and so now Governor Festus is there to judge cases. The Jews didn't waste any time, and they came and they tried to get Festus to give them a favor, to allow them to take Paul back with them. Festus didn't know that an ambush was waiting. So what did Festus do? He said, no, we're going to try Paul right here. In chapter 25, verse 7, the trial begins. The Jews have encircled Paul, and they are making serious accusations against him. One saying this, another saying that. They're accusing him of this and they're accusing him of that. And Paul is just listening as all of these are trying to make a case against him. Then in verse 8, Paul makes a defense. He simply says, I have done nothing wrong against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. Festus, wanting to do a favor to the Jews, asked Paul if he would be willing to go with his accusers again back to Jerusalem to be tried there. What did then Paul say? He said, I have done nothing wrong to the Jews. As for yourself, you know that very well. Then verse 11, if however I am guilty of anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. After Festus conferred with his council, he declared, you have appealed to Caesar, so Caesar you will go. Before Paul was sent to Caesar, he conferred with King Agrippa. King Agrippa had come into town and Festus needed to write something to the emperor. He didn't know what to write. And so he was trying to get advice from King Agrippa. And he told King Agrippa the whole story that he knew from the time he had arrived on the scene until that moment. And one of the things that he said in verses 18 and 19 was this. As he was talking to King Agrippa, he said in verse 18, the accusers got up to speak, and they did not charge him with any crimes that I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and a dead man named Jesus, who Paul claimed was alive. That's all that these accusers were able to bring against Paul. And Festus knew that there was nothing here deserving of death. There was nothing that he had done. There was no crime to send him to Caesar. But because he had appealed to Caesar he was going to go. Now, what does this chapter tell us? Two things. Number one, Christians have the right to defend themselves. We don't have to just simply roll over. We have a right to stand up in this country and say, I deserve to be heard. My voice deserves to be heard. And so what did Paul do? He said, I appeal to Caesar. I've done nothing wrong. And Festus, as a judge, you know I've done nothing wrong. But he stood to defend himself. But how did he do it? He was calm and he was collected. He was controlled. He was poised and he was patient. How in the world could Paul stand there encircled by all of these accusers lying about him and to keep his cool? The Holy Spirit was with him, and the Holy Spirit gave him strength. Not only that, but he had faith in God's sovereignty as well, that God was on the throne, that God was in control, and that God would see him through. The second thing is that as believers, we should use the court system. Now, even though the court appears, as it did here, to be corrupt, Paul used the court system. He stood to defend himself, but when he realized that there was corruption there, what did Paul do? He appealed to a higher court. He appealed to Caesar. We need to do the exact same thing. If we ever find ourselves where we need to defend ourselves and it's not being heard appropriately, we as well should appeal to a higher judge. But then, can I say something else to you as well? When we appeal to a higher court, we have God, who is the ultimate judge, and we can appeal to him because God is the ultimate judge. Thank you for joining the 2020 New Testament Challenge.